Hello, everybody, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is a incredible joy and honor to welcome you to this figurative fireside chat. I'm Ocean Robbins, a father, a son, a husband, CEO of Food Revolution Network, and so honored and so grateful to be with all of you, fellow humans, on this journey of life, as we try to live in the best way we can on this earth, as we try to honor all our relationships. And for me, this event is about honoring relationships. It's about honoring the journey of life, and it's about sharing a profound moment in my journey with my community, with the community of Food Revolution Network. And I am so grateful to all of you who have chosen to take this time to bear witness with me to a profound moment, a profound passage. And I just want to thank you for coming. So, in this next 75 minutes or so, I'm going to share some stories. I'm going to share pretty vulnerably, and I'm also going to take some time to respond to some of the questions and comments that come in the chat. I believe that the chat should be on, but I'm not seeing any comments yet, so I'm wondering if that needs to be modified somehow. I'm not quite sure how to address that. My apologies, folks. If you can't leave a message in the chat, try the Q&A box and leave comments there if you wouldn't mind. And at least then I can, yes, that is working. Chat is disabled. I am sorry. I am not used to doing these events all by myself. So I'm not quite sure how to get it enabled, but I do see that the Q&A box is open. So go ahead and share if you want to where you are from and what inspires you to be a part of this moment with me and with this community. Ah, yes, we're hearing from Joanne. It's okay. All will work out. Cynthia, such a privilege being here with you this evening. Ocean. Aruni saying hi. Thank you all so much for coming. Lucy, hello, Ocean. Thank you for sharing. I just want to say I'm feeling the love right now, and it means a lot. So, little context. As many of you know, but perhaps not everybody, my dad, my colleague, my dear friend, John Robbins, who founded Food Revolution Network with me in 2012, who, along with my beloved and incredible mother, Deo Robbins, brought me into this world almost 52 years ago on Salt Spring Island, British Columbia, left his earthly body. He died on June 11th. He had polio as a child that left him for a time paralyzed from the waist down. And he walked with a major limp throughout his youth and young adulthood. He was told by doctors he would never walk normally, but he and my mom sought to do some pretty profound healing work as they met as teenagers and wound up moving to Canada and doing yoga and meditation for hours every day. And my dad recovered his fitness to an extraordinary extent. He ended up becoming a marathon runner and a triathlete, climbing mountains with me, and we had a lot of fun together. He was practically a picture of health for decades and decades. And about half the time, third to half the time that people get polio as a child, they develop something called post-polio syndrome later in life, which is a condition that essentially can return a lot of the original symptoms. It's not contagious, but they can lose the ability to walk. They can also be impacted with brain fog and a whole host of other things, and it can in time be devastating. So usually it happens 15 to 30 years after the original diagnosis. In my dad's case, it lasted, he had 70 healthy years. And then in his early 70s, post-polio syndrome kicked in and it hit him pretty hard in the last number of years. And so my mom and I, my wife and I, my kids and I, our whole family, all of our family and our beloveds were holding him in this journey. And we had to watch this incredibly brilliant, fit man suffer in ways that seemed so unfair. And he sought all the way through to make the best of it that he could, to live with as much gusto, as much creativity, as much courage as possible. And, his version throughout life of the serenity prayer had always been grant me the courage to change the things I can't accept. I mean, my dad just really, really wanted to be an activist, and he wanted to make this world a better place, and he wanted to fight through all the challenges that he faced. And probably having polio as a child was part of what fueled that in him. And so as it played out, he found in his last years that he could not change some of what he was facing. And so he cultivated a quality of acceptance and inner peace that was also extraordinary. And so our whole family got to witness that and learn from that. I had a dream a few days before my father died in which I was standing on the edge of this vast ocean, the wet kind of ocean, not this kind of ocean. And I was standing on the edge of this vast ocean, blue and peaceful, and there was a vessel taking off out to sea fast. And it was like this pod, a little like a space capsule shape, and it had glass on all sides, and it could see in every direction. I knew that about it, and I could see into it, and through it, I could see everything it could see. And it was taking off fast into the great beyond. So my experience since my dad made his transition was almost as if I had a little foothold going with him to the other side. Now that might sound strange, might sound very odd to some of you, but it's just how I've experienced it. So through that, I feel as if through the process of my dad's death and transition, I feel like I have a different perspective on life, on my life, on the purpose of this life, and maybe on what we're all up to on this planet. And that's part of kind of what I want to share with you tonight. I also want to share some of the stories of the moments in my life that my dad shaped me and helped to shape the world in profound ways. Now, I also want to acknowledge my dad was very human. He's not now, but he was very human. And he had traumas in his childhood that continued to haunt him and affect him throughout his life. He could be cranky and even ornery at times. He was a national champion in debate in high school, and you did not want to get in an argument with this man. And at times, like all of us, he caused harm. And so as I'm talking tonight about his magnificence and brilliance, I think it's really important to ground it in the fact that he was also deeply human. And that in fact, his brilliance came in and through, was forged in and through the prism of all the challenges that he faced in his life. And I think it's also important to name that at the end of his life, he made friends with a few very powerful words. Please, because he was dependent on support in his last months and years. And he asked for help with the most increasingly gracious, respectful voice. Thank you. The depth of gratitude that he felt. He leaned into gratitude. It's like the more he lost of his function and his capacity, the more grateful he became for what he still had and for all the people that made his life possible. He used to talk about how those who are not conversant in the language of gratitude can never be on speaking terms with happiness. And he really leaned into gratitude as the deepest way that he could find to cultivate his joy. And then he also made friends with the words, I'm sorry. And I told him in the last week of his life that it could be that the ways that he made amends, the ways that he sought to apologize and clean up impacts that he had had that were not his soul's intention and desire, was perhaps his greatest gift to me. And here's why. All of us in the course of life on this earth are going to do harm. We're going to hurt people. It's just how it is in this world. How are we with that? And are we willing to and able to clean up those messes and take responsibility for those things and make amends? And my dad's courage to do that and to model that was extraordinary. I hope that I can also do that in my life. See the places where I may have caused harm, of course not intentionally, but nevertheless, it happens, right? And do what I can to make amends. So with all that said, I want to share a bit of a story now. And we're going to start now with some slides. So let's see, here we go. Hopefully the tech on this will work better than the tech on the chat. Oops. Okay, so there we go. Living a legacy of love in action. Okay, so that's my dad and me a few years ago. Forgive me if I tear up a lot during this, folks. All right, and there's us through the years. So in the bottom left, you can see my dad holding me as a baby on Salt Spring Island, British Columbia, Canada. On the bottom right, you can see me holding him at a point when he really couldn't walk anymore, at the very end of his life. And in between, a lot of other pictures of us. Top left, by the way, that's me with my incredible, awesome, identical twin sons, River and Bodie Robbins. My beloved wife, Phoenix, and I are blessed with twins who are now 24 years old, awesomely autistic, and so precious. My dad, however, didn't grow up in a one-room log cabin in the middle of the woods. He grew up in an ice cream family. My grandpa, Irvin Robbins, was the co-founder of what was to become the world's largest ice cream company, Baskin-Robbins. And my dad, John, grew up with an ice cream cone-shaped swimming pool in the backyard and 31 flavors of ice cream in the freezer. He was groomed to one day join in running the family business. That was what his dad wanted from him, and he was working in the factory starting at the age of 7. But then when my dad was in his early 20s, he was offered that chance to join in running the business. You see, at the time, my dad's uncle, Bert Baskin, was dying of heart disease, and my grandpa was losing his brother-in-law and business partner. And he wanted to know if he should sell the business and leave his family and Bert's family set for life financially, or he could have hope that my dad would join him in running it, in which case he would not sell. But my dad said, no, I do not want to do this with my life. And my grandpa sold the company, and he was bitter. And my dad walked away not only from the family business, but any access to the family wealth, no trust fund. He was walking away from all of it. And things were fairly hard in their relationship for some time. But my dad made a very different choice after his uncle Bert died. My dad and my mom, Dale, moved to a little island, Salt Spring Island, off the coast of the Canada, where they became back to the lander hippies. They practiced yoga and meditation for hours a day. They grew most of their own food in the garden, and they named their kid Ocean. And they almost named me Kale, by the way before kale was cool. But we did eat a lot of kale and cabbage and carrots and other veggies from the garden, and also quite a few wild berries, which were my personal favorite. Word has it I devoured this entire tub. I loved going picking wild berries, and I still do. Well, as I got a bit older, we would visit my grandparents, and pretty much every year, and I could see the sort of icy chill. My grandpa was mad that my dad had walked away from his life's work. He didn't like what happened to Baskin-Robbins after he sold it. The company started using artificial vanilla flavoring and treating its franchise owners a lot less well, and making a lot of other choices he did not care for. And he blamed my dad for all of it, because if my dad had only done the right thing and joined him, this would not be happening. But no, my dad had walked away, and yet we were still family. And we learned over time that blood was thicker even than ice cream, that there was still love, and we weren't going to let dispute over ice cream or money stop us from loving each other. So I remember those visits being tense, but I also remember them fondly because there was love even in and through it all. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to family dynamics that are complicated, where there is love and there's also stress. So anyway, that was the case. And then a remarkable thing happened. My dad wrote a book called Diet for New America. It came out in 1987. It was about how our food choices affect our health, our happiness, and the future of life on Earth. And it became this runaway bestseller. The media called my dad the rebel without a cone. They also called him the prophet of nonprofit. And as fate would have it, one of his readers ended up being my grandpa Irv, who wound up practically on death's door with serious heart issues, type 2 diabetes, and weight issues. His doctors told him he didn't have long to live unless he made big changes, and they gave him a copy of Diet for a New America and encouraged him to follow its advice. Well, my grandpa did. He read the copy of the book that the doctor gave him, not the signed copy my dad had given him, by the way. But he did follow its advice. He ended up giving up sugar, cutting way down on animal products, eating way more fruits and vegetables, starting every day with oatmeal. He said, I'm not a card-carrying vegetarian, but he almost was, and he even gave up ice cream. And Grandpa Irv got results. He ended up reversing his diabetes, reversing his heart disease, getting off a bunch of medications because he didn't need them anymore. His favorite part was that his golf game improved 7 strokes. My favorite part was that he lived 19 more healthy years. So we really have seen in our family how powerful food can be to harm us or to heal us. And the remarkable thing was that in those 19 more healthy years that Grandpa Irv had, there was a lot of healing that happened in our family. There was still tension and pain and challenges, but there was also a lot of respect. And my dad and I were with Grandpa Irv on his deathbed on the last day of his life. And I remember him saying to my dad, he was saying, you know, when you left Baskin-Robbins, I thought you were crazy. He said, and I might have been right. But thank God some of us have lived long enough to learn a few new things. And, you know, he couldn't ever utter the words, I love you. It just wasn't really in his vocabulary, at least not with his son or his grandson, but I felt the love. And what he could say was, I'm proud of you. And he said that to me too. And it meant a lot, you know, and then he was gone. And then life went on. And I founded a nonprofit organization that was inspired by my dad's legacy of impact in the world, and wound up reaching over 650,000 students in school assemblies across the United States. I've jumped back a little bit in time here. So my grandpa died in 2008. This is back in 1990. So we've changed time contexts. But I founded Yes, and we reached 650,000 students around the US speaking about the environment and food and how young people could make a difference for their health and the planet. And then we ended up starting to organize leadership events with young activists in over 65 countries. And I got to tour the globe working with young people in a huge range of contexts and environments and seeing that all over the world, everybody eats. And what we're eating is having this enormous impact on our health and on our planet. I loved that nonprofit and I loved the work that I was doing. It didn't pay a lot of money, but my dad and mom had generated some financial resources through my dad's best-selling books and incessant speaking tours year after year after year on the road. And we were counting on that. You see, my wife Phoenix and I had these wonderful, awesomely autistic twins, Bodhi and River, and they were on the autism spectrum, and they were likely to need some lifelong support. And so we figured, well, my parents would leave some money for them that would take care of them so they would be okay. But then a strange thing happened. Our family's financial advisor had encouraged my parents to put all of their savings, as well as my wife and I put all our little savings, in an investment fund that turned out to be with a man named Bernard Madoff, who made off with the money. And so overnight, 99% of my parents' financial resources was gone in 2008. And so then our family suddenly was in a very different situation. And, you know, we knew how to live simply, but essentially what had happened is my dad had gone through these dramatic class swings in his life. So he was born into, you know, unearned riches, essentially. And then he had walked away from it into chosen rags, essentially, with my mom, where they lived in the one-room log cabin and lived on less than $1,000 a year. And then he had built up financial resources through doing really, really good work and come into a degree of earned wealth. And now that was gone, unchosen rags, essentially. And it was a scary time. But I'll tell you, one of the amazing things about that time was that the word got out about that, and people who had been touched by my dad's work started sending gifts to our family. I'm not just talking about one or two, I'm talking about hundreds of checks coming in the mail to my mom and dad, often with the most heartfelt letters about how people's lives had been changed. And those gifts created the breathing room for our family to have space to think about what was next. And I decided I needed to move on from the nonprofit because as much as I loved the work I was doing there, I wanted to see if there might be a way that I could also earn a good living that could help my parents retire in dignity, that could help my children to have the resources that they need to sustain and thrive long term, and that could make an even bigger difference in the world. That was my question. That was my quest. Not in a nonprofit structure, but in a social profit structure. So that compelled me in 2012 to join with my dad in launching Food Revolution Network with a mission of healthy, ethical, sustainable food for all. So we founded it and with our first Food Revolution Summit in 2012. And now we've held 14 summits for over 2 million people. We're about to start another one in a few days, actually. And the response to Food Revolutions Network's work just blew me away. And I've been the CEO from the beginning, looking at how we could bring internet and modern technology and marketing skills to changing the way the world eats. It's been an incredible journey, and working with my dad along the way has been a profound blessing. And it's we were this incredible team. And one of the things that I am most grateful for was how supportive he was of me. I think a lot of times a father and a son start a business together, and you're going to expect some power dynamics to show up. We got along fabulously. And I felt like seen, affirmed, and supported by him every step of the way, not blindly, honestly. He saw me, he respected me, and he supported me. And it was such a joy. Recently, I found myself just in the last couple of weeks getting kind of self-critical. And then I realized that I'd gotten used to having my dad buoy me up. I talk about challenges, and he'd tell me how proud he was of me and how much he loved me and how well I was doing. And that would just lift my spirits time and time again. And I realized I don't have that anymore. But then I tuned into his spirit. I kind of talked to him, as I've taken to doing quite a bit lately. And I said, hey, I miss having your love and support. And what I heard from him, I heard this voice in my head. It said, hold yourself kindly. So I'm receiving that, and I'm inviting you to receive that too. How can we hold ourselves kindly? There's this kind of belief a lot of us, I think, have that if we push ourselves hard enough and criticize ourselves fiercely enough, we'll somehow perform better and do more. And maybe sometimes that's a good motivator for people, criticism. But I think there are also times when that becomes a motivator driven more by fear than by love. And I'm really curious, how can we hold ourselves kindly, especially in times of great loss? And with that love, maybe there's a different kind of energy that can fuel us, that isn't so much fear of getting it wrong or that incessant drive for perfectionism, but something more born of love and meaning and values and service and purpose. Because of course my dad did die on June 11th of 2025, and he fought hard to live as abundantly and vibrantly as he could, but that time came, and it came faster than I think any of us were really ready for. But at the same time, at some deeper level, I felt as if it was his time to go. So as much as I wanted him here, vibrant and strong and healthy, I was also relieved he was out of pain. And here's a fascinating thing I experienced. I felt as if the moment that he died, his soul was free. And I got this really interesting perspective on what do we take with us when we die. It's obvious we don't take money with us, right? I don't think we take reputation with us or what other people think of us. I don't think that we care about that stuff anymore. I don't think that we take our life traumas with us. We clearly don't take our physical pain or suffering with us, right? That's all gone. We're free from all that. So what are we, and what do we take with us? Well, I don't know if any of us can really honestly answer that. I'm just going to tell you what I have experienced. And depending on your faith perspective and your cosmology and how you hold the world, take it and interpret it however you want to. But this is just what I have felt. I felt as if once my dad died, his spirit was free of all those things that I named, but there was something that persisted. And what I felt was that he carried with him what he had learned about love, what he had learned about values and the meaning of life. And he was free now, free from his traumas, free from his triggers, free from his attachments, free from his fears, free from his suffering. But there was something of love that persisted, and there was this joy that I felt. And I felt as if he wanted me to be free now, as if he wants all of us to be free now. He said before he died, when I die, if I have the option, I want to be a force. I want to be a force for good and healing in this world. Now, I don't know if y'all believe in angels or what that term would even mean to you. I don't know if I believe in angels, but I kind of do. And I kind of feel like my dad is a presence that is there for me. And I've had so many experiences since June 11th where I was struggling, where I was crying, where I was empty, where I felt broken. And then I felt my heart open, even in and through the pain, in some way where this energy, this love came through. And here's what I want to invite. If you've been touched by his message, his mission, his legacy, if you're touched by what you're hearing now, I want to invite you to let him be your ally too. Because I believe that that is possible, that he can be in more than one place at once. Now, you might not believe any of this. You might not think that souls live on. You might think they go to heaven and have no interest in earth. That's fine. But at least I invite you to consider the possibility that we're not isolated and alone on this earth, that there are beneficent forces. And whether we interpret them through the lens of our ancestors, our elders, or angels, or we just feel a little supported in some way, I hope that what I'm sharing tonight can hearten you and support you in some ways on your journey. So I want to share with you now some of the wisdom from my dad's life, some of the things he shared with me along the way that were formative and meaningful and powerful and significant to me. So when I was little, I lived on this island with my mom and my dad. And my dad used to quote Henry David Thoreau, "I make myself rich by making my wants few." You see, we were living on very, very, very little money and growing most of our own food. And yet I felt pretty rich because I had love. I had a clean environment. I had time with my parents. And my dad used to talk at an early age for me, early in my life, about consumerism and about the way that so many people are caught in this consumeristic trance, if you will. That's what he used to call it, where they get caught in trying to buy stuff. We've equated net worth with self-worth. We've made it seem as if how many zeros are in our bank account is a testament to whether or not we are a success, whether or not we are good people. And in that, we've made consumption a way of life, and we've made money more important than humanity, than integrity, or than the earth itself. And so many of us work ourselves to the bone so that we can buy stuff we don't really need, often with credit card debt, and then we're enslaved by that credit card debt or by the bills to work harder. And then we get so exhausted from working so hard that we want to buy stuff to help ourselves cope and survive. And then we're caught in this vicious cycle. And my dad said the most precious wealth is time. Time and attention and presence. So he wanted to give me that most of all. And I had that. I had time with my dad. I had time with my mom growing up on that cabin. We didn't have a lot of stuff. When we visited my grandparents, it was an interesting culture shock because they had a lot of stuff and they would often take me out shopping. Pretty much all my clothes either came from them or from thrift stores. They'd take us out shopping, take me out shopping, buy me whatever I wanted. And I can remember, by the way, when I visited my grandma and grandpa alone when I was about 14. And they flew me down to Rancho Mirage, California, and took me out for a big shopping spree. And then towards the end of the visit, my grandpa sits me down and he says, "Ocean, I want you to know something about life. Children don't always follow the same path as their parents. Your dad certainly didn't follow the path we had in mind for him. And you may not decide to follow the kind of path your parents have in mind for you. If ever you get tired of being poor, if ever you decide that you want a different lifestyle, we want you to know that we're here for you." Now, I'm sure he meant that with incredible love. He was afraid that his grandson was being harmed by hippie parents who were dressing him in rags and didn't understand how important money was to survival and well-being on this planet. He'd made earning money the focal point of his life. He'd been wildly successful, and he did not get what my parents were doing with his grandson. He was trying to say, I love you and I'm here for you. However, at the time, I was a Star Wars fan, and I felt like I was Luke Skywalker hearing Darth Vader say, Luke, come to the dark side. And so I was polite, but inside I was like, oh no, I'm not going that way. Anyhow, that was a powerful message. Another message from my dad was, you can do hard things. When I was 7 years old, he took me out on a track and said, let's start running, Ocean. And I was like, okay. So we went for a run. And after about an eighth of a mile, I was getting winded and my lungs were starting to burn. And I was like, okay, it's hurting. And he said, that's when it gets good. Instead of stopping, he wanted me to keep going. And we slowed down a little bit because he could see that he was pacing me too fast, but we kept going. And I also learned about pacing, by the way. And depending on how far I was going, I needed a very different pace. What a life lesson. Pacing and that you can do hard things. That just because something is painful does not mean it's bad or to be avoided. Sometimes you want to lean into those things. He used to say when we were working out together, embrace the suck. And he really did enjoy that. And you get all the neurotransmitters released on the dopamine and everything else when you're doing hard things sometimes. And my parents always throughout my dad's entire life, my mom still to this day, would end every hot shower with a cold plunge. Now, growing up in Canada, they would have cold showers and the water was cold. And they would whoop and holler in the bathroom. And I would hear that. And now we're learning about this concept of hormesis. That sometimes hormesis is doing hard things like resistance training or cold water immersions or other things that are hard that actually breed resilience and make us healthier, more vital, and more alive. We didn't have fancy terms like that back then, but we did learn about doing hard things. And I went on to become a marathon runner at the age of 10. I ran 105 times around a quarter-mile track for my school jogathon. And my dad was my coach. And all through the years, I've remembered this lesson. You can pace yourself and you can do hard things. Now, it doesn't mean we only do hard things. Sometimes it's important to hold ourselves kindly, to have gentleness and love with ourselves. So we don't always push ourselves, right? But to be able to do it, to be able to lean into hard things because it matters or just because you want to, can be very liberating and empowering. When I was 4 years old, we moved off the island in Canada to Vancouver Island, Victoria area, British Columbia, so that I could have a school to go to. And suddenly I was around other kids. And I was a little nervous. I had only had a couple of friends in my life up to that point. And so my dad said, Ocean, we're going to get you some friends. So before school even started, he took me door to door around the neighborhood, knocking on neighbors' doors, asking if they had any kids in the family that were around my age, saying my son Ocean and I and our family, we just moved here, and we're looking for some friends for Ocean to play with. Well, lo and behold, I made some friends. And when we moved again, a few months later, we did it again, and I made more friends. And then when I was 10 and we moved to California and I lived in the United States for the first time, once again, knocking on doors, meeting my friend Danny, best friend for years. And my dad said to me at that time, when I said, there's all strangers, he said, well, a stranger is just a friend you haven't met yet. What a life lesson that is, huh? You see, I actually have come to the belief that most people could be friends with most people if they met under the right circumstances. We have lots of reasons to not like each other, to mistrust each other, to disrespect each other, to be walled off and siloed off from each other. But Abraham Lincoln said the best way to destroy an enemy is to make them a friend. And I think it is true. Now, we're not going to be able to be friends with everybody. Not everybody wants to be friends with us. But can we expand our pool of respect, kindness, and dignity to include more people? And kids seem to have an easier time of that, don't they? So my dad wanted me to learn about that early on. And so I learned to make friends. And I continue to make friends as I go through my life. And I'm so grateful for that. But my dad also would talk about loneliness and the fact that so many people are lonely. And he used to say that loneliness kills faster than cigarettes. Well, now we actually know that that's literally true, folks. There's research on this, and we now know without shadow of a doubt that loneliness can be deadly, and that people who feel deeply alone or lonely in their lives tend to have very, very short life expectancies. Here's the thing, being lonely and alone are actually not the same thing. And my dad used to talk about that too, that loneliness is when you feel bereft, empty, hollow, like a big lack in the center of your heart, or you're numb or walled off, right? And then alone is when you actually are present with self. And you can be alone and filled up from the inside out with love for yourself. I love my own company. I love being with me. I love listening to music and dancing like nobody's watching. I love hiking in the forest and singing at the top of my lungs like I would never sing in front of other people because I'm not self-conscious, right? Those kinds of alone experiences can be profoundly satisfying and soul nourishing and love filled. However, when we feel lonely, when we feel empty inside, and a lot of us cover this over with disguises and pretension, but deep down inside, the masses of us feel lonely, I think. So learning how to cultivate real loving human connection is so profound and so utterly important. And that, we can look at studies and research, but the actual practice of forming human bonds isn't easy. It means sometimes being vulnerable. I believe one of the most sacred places on earth is a place where deep vulnerability can be held with love. I'm seeking to bring some vulnerability now, and I am feeling the love. And by the way, I'm seeing the hearts just constantly flowing up. I don't know if you're seeing this on your Zoom screen too, but there's just like nonstop hearts flowing up, and it is so, so lovely to see that. So thank you. Um, Thank you for all the love, everybody. So then, another thing we're learning is that stress is formed out of isolation. Chronic stress, in fact, when people feel isolated, they have more inflammation in their body, their immunity goes down, they have more heart problems, and they have more mood problems. So there's a profound biological connection between isolation and health outcome. My dad is rather famous for this one. Every bite makes you healthier or it makes you sicker. Um, he helped to bring to the world the power of food to shape our lives and our health destinies, and inspired millions of people to look at food as an opportunity to take a stand for healthier lives. And now we're joined in this message by an increasing body of health research and also reputable organizations. In fact, there's growing momentum behind plant-based eating and whole foods eating. Leading medical and professional organizations are now recommending diets centered around whole plant foods, including the American Cancer Society, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, American College of Lifestyle Medicine, American College of Cardiology, American Heart Association, and the American Medical Association. The world is changing, and more people are realizing that plant-based diets that are rich in vegetables and fruits and legumes and whole grains and nuts and seeds can help lower cholesterol, improve blood sugar, reduce inflammation, support a healthier weight, and lower risk for heart disease and type 2 diabetes and even certain forms of cancer. Even flexitarian shifts, where people just eat more plants, whether or not they cut out all the meat or animal products, can make a radical difference in people's life and health outcomes. We know that more plants equals more fiber, less saturated fat, and more longevity. Plant-based diets support gut health, they bring down inflammation, and they support long-term well-being. Food is so powerful that it really should be medicine. My dad used to say a doctor who doesn't know about food is like a firefighter who doesn't know about water. And yet today, the average physician in all their medical training gets less than 19 hours of education on nutrition, most of which, if they get any, is focused on diseases that are caused by nutritional deficiencies, not on how to help patients eat well. So the reality is we have a healthcare system that acts like food didn't matter. And we've got a food system that acts like health didn't matter. And a lot of people are suffering and dying because of it. My dad used to say food's not just a commodity, it's also a community. Every bite we take connects us to people, ecosystems, and practices around the globe. And by the way, it also helps to shape macroeconomic and social forces. The ethnic burden of chronic disease does not fall equally on all ethnic communities. It falls uniquely on Black and Hispanic Americans, who are twice as likely as whites to develop Alzheimer's or another form of dementia. African Americans are almost a third more likely to die from heart disease than Caucasian Americans. And if you were to look at the economic burden of racial and ethnic health disparities in financial terms, you would see that as of 2018, it was estimated at $451 billion per year. That is to say that in the United States alone, if communities of color just had the same health outcomes as white communities, we as a nation would have saved almost $500 billion per year. Now, some of those costs are borne out in terms of Medicare and Medicaid. Some of those are borne out at the state level. Some are borne out through insurance companies, which translates into higher insurance premiums for everybody. And some of them are impacting the direct families themselves. Cycles of intergenerational poverty persist in part because people who are of low income to begin with wind up being disproportionately saddled with the burden of disease, poor access to healthy food, limited freedom, more toxins in their environment, and then they wind up sick, and then whatever they may have earned gets depleted late in life, leaving families in intergenerational poverty instead of wealth. So I truly believe that for those of us who want everybody, regardless of how much money they have, regardless of their skin color, to have a fair shot in life, for those of us who want that, I really believe that addressing the health disparity that's leading to that's fueled by food disparity along lines of race and class is one of the most powerful social justice actions we can take. My dad and I had a lot of conversations about this. We talked so much about how can we truly create a more equitable, healthy society for everybody. He had lived with wealth, he had lived with poverty, and he wanted to help bridge the gap and recognize that humans are humans and humans deserve love and respect no matter how many zeros they have in the bank account. And you know what? A person with their health has 1,000 dreams, they say, but a person without it's only got one dream, which is to get it back. So at some level, my dad and I felt that our work at Food Revolution Network was about helping people to get their thousands of dreams back. Of course, food doesn't just impact human health, it also impacts planetary health. And my dad helped to bring this message to the world in a huge way. According to research published in the journal Science a few years back, analyzing data from over 40,000 farms around the globe, researchers concluded that animal agriculture provides 18% of the world's calories and uses up 83% of the world's agricultural land. The researchers concluded that avoiding meat and dairy is the single biggest way to reduce your environmental footprint. If just theoretically the whole world went vegan tomorrow, they reported, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but just stay with me with this thought experiment for a second, we'd instantly free up an area of land equivalent to the entirety of the European Union, Australia, China, and the United States combined. All that land could be used to be reforested and rewilded. We could bring back rainforests and biodiversity. We could save endangered species. We could sequester carbon intelligently and thoughtfully. We could grow organic food sustainably for future generations and have plenty of land for housing and wind farms and all the things we may need for future generations. Think about the things we could do. We could save water and ecosystems and rainforests and topsoil and sequester carbon and so much else just by changing what we eat. And of course, you don't have to go all the way. Every bite you take literally shapes the future. And animal agriculture, it turns out, is kind of a protein factory in reverse. What we're learning today is that it takes about 10 pounds of grain or soy to produce 1 pound of feedlot beef. Anytime you move up the food chain, you get massive inefficiency. It just takes a lot more calorie inputs to feed livestock than to eat calories directly. And that long food chain has massive environmental impact. Of the mammalian biomass on Earth, the collective body weight of all mammal bodies, we're at 34% human bodies, 62% livestock, and 4% wild animals, wild mammals. All the giraffes and elephants, all the zebras, all the wild horses, all the deer and caribou, all of the wild creatures of the planet put together are less than 4% of the mammalian biomass now. So what you can see is we're eating them out of house and home. We're destroying ecosystems and habitat to create land on which to graze livestock or to grow food to feed to livestock. So part of my purpose in life, I think, is to bring that 62% down so we can bring that 4% back up. My dad used to ask a simple question that's pretty powerful. He said, why do we love some animals as part of our family and call them pets? And then we treat other animals with unimaginable cruelty before we kill them and call them dinner. Now, you don't have to be a vegetarian or an animal rights lover to want animals to be treated with respect, to live decent lives, but they don't in today's factory farms. My dad's seminal book, Diet for New America, which came out in 1987, started off with a whole part on animals. And it's interesting, a lot of animal rights activists just focus on the negative, like what's horrible about livestock operations today and how the birds are debeaked and the pigs have their tails cut off and the animals are living in manure their whole lives and they have open wounds and birds can't lift a single feather and all the things, right, that are so painful. They must make angels weep. And yet, what he started off with was talking about animals as sources of love and intelligence. He made the case essentially that animals deserve care, that they have feelings, and that they can love us, and that they're intelligent. And as people read that, their hearts opened. And even when they read about chickens, he didn't just talk about horrible treatment of chickens. He talked about the phrase, just like a mother hen, how chickens can be remarkably intelligent and kind and nurturing, and how they love their babies, and how, yes, they have pecking orders. They're actually finely tuned creatures in their own way. So as he shared these stories, then suddenly people's hearts were opened, and then they could be broken when they saw what these animals were being put through. And the point here wasn't like it is just wrong to ever kill an animal. The point was that there's something that feels like it's a fundamental violation of human stewardship and human responsibility on this planet to treat the animals with whom we share this earth in this way. And from that, he helped to awaken the conscience of a nation. In the 5 years after Diet for a New America was published in 1987, beef consumption in the United States dropped by almost 20%. There was a cultural zeitgeist moment, if you will, and Diet for a New America was part of it. My dad used to quote Bradley Miller, teaching a child not to step on a caterpillar is as valuable to the child as it is to the caterpillar. You see, we are capable of profound compassion and kindness as humans. That's kind of who we are. And I feel like my dad was kind of trying to call us back to our humanity, to be humane, to be kind and to be loving, and to see ourselves as stewards instead of exploiters of the web of life. And now we have research backing all this up. There was an 8-week compassion training program which showed that people who practiced compassion and kindness meditations, this was in Portugal, had measurable results. Their blood test showed that they had a drop in natural killer cells and pro-inflammatory gene activity. The researchers found that practicing compassion can help calm an overactive stress response on the cellular level, bringing down chronic inflammation and potentially reducing risk of disease. My dad also had another profound impact on me when I was about 7 years old. We got TV for the first time. And one time he and I were sitting there watching TV, to be super honest with you, I think it might have been football. And his feet were cold. And this was actually a thing that he dealt with a lot all through his life because I think the polio had left him without full circulation in his legs. So I didn't know that though at the time, but we're sitting on the couch and he says to me, "Hey, Ocean, would you get my slippers for me, please?" And I looked at him and the slippers were about equidistant between him and me and they were for his feet. And I kind of looked at him a little, like rolled my eyes, and I was like, "Why don't you get your own slippers?" And he said, "Ocean, there's 2 reasons. First of all, the less important one is that you're younger than me, and I had polio as a child, and so it's a little harder for me to get up and get my slippers, and it would be easier for you. But and my feet are cold, and it would help me. But the bigger reason, Ocean, is that I've learned something in life that those people are most happy who have learned to find joy in serving others. And so it is my desire to cultivate in you, my son, joy and service." He said, now that might sound kind of self-serving for me to say to you right now. And I looked at him like, yeah, it sure does, Dad. But then he said, but it really is something I want to nurture. Would you be willing to get me my slippers? It would feel so good to me if you did. I would also love to be able to receive your love in all the ways that I can, and that would be another wonderful way for me. So after all that, I was like, okay, fine. I got his slippers, brought them over, and he gave me this huge smile and he said, thank you so much. Now my feet will be warmer and I'll be more comfortable. And more importantly than any of that, I feel your love. Well, after that, I was happy to get him slippers just about any time he wanted. And throughout his life, I did love to support him and I did feel his gratitude and that my love for him mattered to him deeply and profoundly. And that meant a lot to me. And yeah, it could be complicated sometimes when we become the caretakers of our parents. And every child who's ever been in that position knows that that can be complex. And yet it can also be precious to feel that your love matters. And now we're learning that purpose matters too. Research tells us that people who have a strong sense of purpose in life, this was a study of 7,000 adults over age 50, found that people with the lowest sense of purpose were more than twice as likely to die in the following 4 years compared to those with the strongest sense of purpose. This was a study published in JAMA in 2019. The link was especially strong for deaths related to heart and circulatory disease. Even after adjusting for things like health conditions and lifestyle and mood, researchers found that purpose still predicted who would live longer. This means purpose itself may be one of the most potent medicines that we've got. A sense of purpose can help you live longer and healthier. There was a 2021 study reviewing nearly 30 years of research involving more than 12,000 participants. Researchers found that people with a strong sense of meaning in life have lower risk of heart disease, better sleep, less inflammation, and they live longer. This was published in the American Journal of Health Promotion in 2021. And now we have research telling us that it cuts both ways. This was a 6-year study that followed over 16,000 older adults across 13 countries. Researchers found that people who had more meaning in their lives were less likely to get depressed and to feel lonely in their lives. No huge shock there, but they were also less likely to lose physical function or suffer a heart attack. They also found that it goes the other direction, though, that illness erodes purpose, that people who were chronically sick had a harder time feeling a sense of purpose. And it comes back to those 1,000 dreams we were talking about earlier, that a person without their health often just has one dream, which is to get it back. So it creates a negative feedback loop. When you're suffering, when you're in pain, it can be very hard to feel purposeful because you're just wanting to get out of pain and survive. And yet, when we can get our health back, we can have more purpose, which can also give us more health. So negative feedback loops can be reversed and turned into positive feedback loops. Turns out also that giving, we talk often about the importance of receiving support, and that's important. We all got to receive love, right? We get by with a little help from our friends. But it turns out that giving support lowers inflammation. It actually is linked to bringing down all sorts of inflammatory markers in the body, acts of kindness, volunteerism, supporting family and friends, actually is equated with better health for the giver, with lower rates of inflammation and better immune health. Now, here's another piece that's quite profound. Since my dad died, left his earthly body, whatever language we want to use here, I've felt a lot of grief. I've cried a lot more than any time in a lot of years. And I've also felt a lot of gratitude. And they go together for me in a remarkable way. When I visit my mom, I go into my dad's room and we've kind of left it just the way it was before he died, at least so far. And there is on his desk a row of pictures, 12 pictures of him and me together throughout our lives together through the last 51 years. And they're in chronological order, from him holding me as a baby to me holding him at the very end. And he had them all framed in this beautiful row on his desk. That says something about a father's love for his son. And every time I see it, I think, my God, did he ever love me? And did he ever want to show the world how proud he was of me? Recently, I was asked in an interview, what was your dad most proud of? And It wasn't the most humble answer, but I'm not going to lie, I had to be honest because I knew what he would say. He was most proud of his son. And I don't say that to brag. I say that to tell you how deep his love was. When I was a kid, there was these bumper stickers that were often on people's cars that said, "I'm a proud parent of an honor student at whatever school." And then there started to be these other bumper stickers, maybe in jest, that would say, my kid could beat up your honor student." And then my dad got another kind of bumper sticker. It said on the back of his and my mom's car, they had one car, it said, "Proud parent unconditionally." And I felt that, you know? Um, so I think about that and it makes me cry and I feel grateful all at the same time. And so often it's those well springs of gratitude that open my heart. And I think we only grieve things because they were precious. We only miss them because they were wonderful, because they mattered. So inseparable from the grief and the loss is the gratitude that it was at all. And I think about all the people who don't have a parent, and so many of you watching, you may not have had the pleasure of a father or a mother that you felt loved by, that you respected, that learned and grew over the course of life. You may not have had that. If that's the case, I send you my love and my care and my respect and my honoring. And I also hope that as you're hearing all of my stories, you can feel not jealousy, although if you do, of course, I understand, but more so, I hope you can feel included. That maybe in some way my dad's love and all these stories could touch your heart, touch your heart too. And what I'm feeling is that grief and gratitude are so inseparable. And, if we are truly willing to feel our grief, then maybe we're less afraid. And when we're less afraid, maybe we can feel more grateful and, yes, more love. My dad used to quote Khalil Gibran, "The deeper that sorrow has carved in the canyon of your heart, the more joy it can contain." That used to be a lovely statement. I've always loved it, but now it feels so real to me. I feel more joy. I certainly feel more love, and I certainly feel more grief. And I wonder, who would we be if we were not afraid of death or of pain? Now, of course, we're mortal and we're human, and none of us wants pain, and none of us probably wants to die, thank goodness. But we are going to have pain, and we are going to die. And if we can somehow allow ourselves to recognize at a deep reality that that is so, and that awareness could expand our capacity for love instead of shrinking away and tightening in fear, maybe we can feel more love. Maybe we can feel more joy. Maybe we can feel more gratitude. We are learning that love may be one of the most powerful forces in the universe. It awakens our compassion, it awakens our kindness, it awakens our courage, it awakens our conviction, it gives us a sense of meaning. Maybe it is what we take with us when we transfer over. It's certainly a big part of the legacy that we leave behind. And so too is our conscience. My dad used to quote Norman Cousins, "Nothing is more powerful than an individual acting out of their own conscience, thus helping bring the collective conscience to life." So if you've been inspired by Food Revolution Network or by my dad or even by our time together tonight, I hope you can feel your own conscience stirred, your own conviction stirred, your own sense of purpose stirred, because I truly feel that my dad lived with a sense of purpose throughout his life. And it was messy at times, it was complicated at times, he was absolutely wildly imperfect, but he was always on his learning journey. He was always trying to do the best that he could. And he made a real difference in the world. Food Revolution Network's grown to a global community of more than 1 million members. We send 200 million emails a year. A lot of you have probably gotten quite a few of them. Apologies if it's ever too much. We had over 2 million people join in our Food Revolution Summits. 6 million people annually are visiting our website and our blog with all the articles, over 1,000 articles we've created. We've graduated, this is one of the things I'm most proud of, we've graduated over 700 coaches in our plant-based coaching certificate. And by the way, there's a new class opening up in January. It starts. So if you are interested, go to certificate.foodrevolution.org, because this is where you get to learn how to be a leader in the food revolution with our support. And really, the legacy of my dad's life is in all of our hands. The torch is in all of our hands. And for some people, that is a way they want to carry it forward. And of course, we have 18 incredible team members at Food Revolution Network and an amazing family my dad left as well. So I say it's a time for action for all of us, a time for courage, and a time, of course, for love. So now I'm going to stop sharing the slideshow. And turn now, there are a lot of comments in the Q&A box. Apologies again that the chat isn't working, but I am going to try to get to some of these now, and I want to just hear from you a little bit on some of your reflections. So we'll go in no particular order, but I do want to hear from a few folks. Denise said, I'm proud to be one of those 700 FRN plant-based coaches. How wonderful, Denise. I am so glad that you are. Susan said, it was an honor to have been with you tonight, Ocean. You've touched my heart, and I am truly grateful for you and your dad. Much love. Thank you. Joanne said, it's great to see all the love pouring out to you. Yes, the love, the hearts just don't stop, right? And I'll tell you, one of my dad's greatest gifts to me was being like a magnet for amazing humans. All of the speakers in our Food Revolution summits, all of the people that have been touched by his work that are now part of our community, including all of you. I have truly felt held and upheld by the love in the most profound of ways. And it reminds me that we're not alone and that sometimes our moments of greatest pain and suffering can become our moments of greatest community and of love. After the Madoff scandal, I told you about how hundreds and hundreds of people sent gifts to our family that helped us weather that storm and make it through that time. Since my dad's transition, I have felt held with so much love by our community. I truly feel the power of beloved community, and our whole family has. And it is so precious and so incredibly beautiful. So thank you to all of you for all the ways you've been supporting us, donating to Food Revolution Alliance, by the way, the nonprofit we formed in my dad's honor. More than 300 people have sent gifts. The organization's just getting started, but they were trusting enough to just send donations. If you go to foodrevolutionalliance.org, you can learn more. It's just there's just so many ways that people are participating in showing the love and honoring the legacy, and I'm just blown away. Judy said, thank you for sharing the loss of your father. It's very meaningful to learn of the wisdom and love he shared with you. Keep on sharing the love and carrying the message of good health to our world. Yes, absolutely. Will do, Judy. You too. Sonia said, you're such an inspiration to me. Your words are so true and full of love. Elizabeth said, never-ending love for eternity for you and all. I think I know Elizabeth. Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you. Catherine Parrish, love you, Catherine. Catherine said, love, love, love. Thank you so much. Ty Summers McGinnis said, love heals anything and everything. My mom. She's quoting her mom here, folks. How beautiful. Sally said, I have a tattoo that says how lucky I am to have had something that makes saying goodbye so hard. I got it after my sister passed away as a reminder of the gratitude that it can accompany grief. Yes, Sally, so true. Thank you. Martha said, I'm from Texas. Michelle said, thank you so much for sharing your journey and showing your love. Peggy said, what a beautifully presented heartfelt message. Thank you so much for sharing. Sharon, one of our PBC seers, I just saw you on a call earlier today, said, thank you so much, Ocean, for your vulnerable sharing. The love you and John shared was so beautiful and special. It was an honor to share this space with you tonight, to collectively share in the loss and love. Roxana said, oh, I need to write it again. Baba Ram Dass spent much of his life taking care of others, teaching meditation to people on death row, and taking care of people in hospice and writing books and more. After he had his serious stroke, he talked about being able to offer others the opportunity to care for him, giving other people the gift of being able to give to him. So true, Roxana. And Ram Dass was a great inspiration to our family through the years. An embodiment of compassion, service, mindfulness, kindness, and presence. He wrote many books, including How Can I Help? Be Here Now, and so many others. And yeah, he had a stroke and he needed care and he got to receive. You know, he was one of the most brilliant minds, so articulate and so eloquent, and then he lost that ability to speak that way, but his spirit was still there, forged through all of the love and all the meditation practices he had lived. And you know, looking into his eyes, which I got to do after his stroke, the eternal presence was still there, maybe even purer than ever. So we're not our minds, we're not our gifts and skills, we're not our eloquence, we're not any of that. So what are we then? What is eternal in us? And of course, we want to use our gifts and our resources and our strengths and our capacities as boldly and powerfully as we can. But there's something that's essential to us that is more than any of that. And so it's my perspective that when we hold life through that lens, our lives take on a bit of a different meaning. And we're less likely to sweat the small stuff. We're more likely to live as best we can with value of love and kindness and presence. And after my dad died, I actually had kind of one of the times that he and I were in a bit of conversation, more than a bit actually. One of the things he showed me, hope you don't mind me saying this, again, if it runs contrary to your faith perspective, I apologize. This was just my experience. I felt him showing me that presence is kind of what life is about while we're on earth. And most of us miss most of it. At any given moment, there are millions of things happening that we're not conscious of. Interactions happening in our cells, hormones, blood pumping, all kinds of things, right? Consciousness, sensation, and experience, and we miss most of it, like the vast, vast, vast majority of it. And when we're on autopilot, when we're just coping or surviving, we are missing the opportunity to live. We're not really present. And on autopilot, you can't learn, you can't grow, and you can't get feedback loops, and you don't actually have real, genuine experience. And so one of the things he was showing me was an invitation, I guess you could say, to expand my willingness to be present in each moment. Now, of course, there's going to be moments when we just want to get through the day. We have to survive and cope, and autopilot can be our friend, right? When I'm brushing my teeth, I'd like to be on autopilot. When I'm speaking, I don't want to have to relearn how to speak every time. We've got neural pathways in our brain for a reason, and some of them are on autopilot because our brains love ease. They don't want to have to overwork all the time. So healthy habits are awesome. But so too is presence. One of my favorite sayings is that in the world to come, the learners shall inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves exquisitely prepared for a world that no longer exists. And so I want to thank all of you for being learners, for being curious, for bringing your heart, your consciousness, and your love and your kindness here tonight, for all the ways that you are willing to learn and participate. And as you're part of Food Revolution Network's programs and summits and other events, I thank you for all the ways that you're learning, because we're all having an opportunity to learn so much in this world. Perhaps learn about what really, truly matters most in life. Peggy said, I'm so moved and inspired by your sharing. Thank you, Peggy. Sharon Kusek said, I can see why your dad's most proud of you. Thank you for continuing his legacy. It's about collective consciousness. Thank you, Sharon. Karen Zimmerman said, I respect your honesty and openness. The loss of a parent is so difficult. You give others hope. Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that it seems to me that with life comes a certain amount of suffering. It's just kind of baked into the human experience. And I've always thought that, I wanted to bring less suffering and more joy, more peace, and more love and more health into this world. And I still do. Um, there is a perspective I'm holding, though, which is kind of, this is paradoxical. But it does seem that when I look at my life, some of the moments of greatest suffering have also been my greatest teachers. And it seems then that maybe if we were to think of life on earth as a bit of a school, maybe we learn some of our lessons through pain and suffering as well as through joy and blessings. I'd like to learn more from friendly ways rather than suffering ways, but some things are too painful to not be worth something. When we're going to suffer, let's get something out of it, okay? And so if you've suffered in your life, if you've had dark nights of the soul and cried out to God or whatever force you consider holy and said, why, or save me, or end this, or give me strength when I don't have it anymore. If you've ever had that sensation, I hope that somehow, some way, you've gotten resilient through it or stronger through it or gained something from it that matters. Or if you haven't, then maybe at least you've gained compassion and empathy for other people who suffer and struggle and don't get to put a pretty bow around it, don't get to have a happy ending to it. Because here's the thing, folks. The simple reality is we are all going to die. And if the measure of life success is to live on, then every life ends in failure. But if we can measure success in a different way, where we give our gifts and hopefully live fully, embody our moments of presence, and hopefully get to do something that brings more love and more value and more meaning to this world, then that measure of success, I think, could allow us to end whenever our time comes and know we did good. And that, I think, is a life well lived. So let's all do good as best we can and remember what our priorities, goals, values, and goals really are. Melanie said, thank you for your feelings and lessons from John. I've admired both of you since I found Food Revolution Network. I've changed my eating habits, and I know many others have as well. The impact of John's love is immeasurable and appreciated. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Melanie. Diane said, a beautiful presentation, Ocean. So glad to be invited to join you for it. Much love and joy in your precious memories of your wonderful father. Mary Beth said, thank you so much for sharing, Ocean. We love you. Carolyn said, so thankful for you and your dad that have brought, so thankful for all you and your dad have brought into the world. Light continues to shine brightly. Cindy, thank you so much, Ocean, for continuing your father's legacy and creating your own. Much love to you. Thank you, Cindy. I think that we stand on the shoulders of giants, all of us, if we really look at it. We all have ancestors, whether biological or not, people who have gone before us, who have helped to bend the arc of history towards justice, who have helped to create a more beautiful, loving opportunity to live on this planet, who have inspired us with values and truth-telling and conscience and helped us to know what our values even are through their lived examples. So whoever has inspired you, I invite you to consider them part of your lineage, your ancestry, and now we get to carry on that mighty torch. And I think I'll end tonight with a quote from George Bernard Shaw. My dad put this in Diet for New America. He said, this is the true joy in life, to be used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one, to be a force of nature instead of an ignorant clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. He said, I am a member of the community, and as a member, it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can before I die. Life is no brief candle to me. It is more of a splendid torch, which I want to burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. Well, I want to thank all of you for burning your candle or your torch as brightly as you can. Thank you for living love and values and meaning and purpose and integrity in all the ways that you can. Thank you for the love you are showing to our family, to the FRN community. Thank you for being a part of carrying this legacy forward. The torch, my friends, is in all of our hands. Bless you and thank you. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your partnership. Thank you for your leadership. We truly are in this journey together. And I, for one, am most grateful for it. I'll see you around. We'll be starting a new Food Revolution Summit on September 17th. You can go to summit.foodrevolution.org to sign up if you haven't already. We have our plant-based coaching certificate. Again, go to certificate.foodrevolution.org if you want to enroll. Stay on our email list. Keep participating. Keep spreading the word in all the ways that make sense to you. Every bite you take, every relationship you interact with, every person you love is an opportunity to carry this legacy forward. Bless you all. Thank you all. And good night.